Hello, Drake Huggins, Musically Optimistic here, and today I'm going to be finally reviewing this new Sefu album, Free Archetype. I'm not going to be saying that middle word because it makes me uncomfortable. So this is the long-awaited return of Sefu, who had a very prolific 2022, dropping one of my favorite albums of the year easily with The Sword Drew Blood, and then following it up later in the year in like June and July with Before We Knew and How to Cry, both of which I was a little indifferent to, as I felt like it was declining in quality as it went along, and his output kept getting more and more so. But the album that kicked off that streak for me, as I still haven't listened to Stars Are Born in Paris, The Sword Drew Blood, was a fantastic, very emotionally potent, and very experimental, off-the-wall, just brilliant record in my opinion. Like, yeah, there are some structuring issues that keep it from perfect in my eyes, but like, other than that, it's a flawless record. The lyrics are so dense, the instrumentals are perfect, the vocals are heartfelt and endearing. Hell, even Chris's composition, which is just a piano piece by the only feature on the record, is fantastically placed and just beautiful all around. With the two other records we got in the year, Before We Knew and How to Cry, felt like the qualities were a bit more inconsistent. You could see many more recording and mixing flaws, and especially with Before We Knew, it was just so many ideas put into one little thing that just kind of contradict each other, kind of like Kanye's The Life of Pablo. While yes, there were quite a few ideas on the record that I liked, there were also a handful that I didn't. And then Before We Cry, honestly, I haven't come back too much. I know that there was the one song on there that I really liked, but I stopped listening to it after like a few months because the mixing is just so... And so, after exactly a year of dropping Before We Knew, we get this album, which, no teasers, not even a release date tease. There was no sign that this album was coming, and then one day I just woke up, went on Instagram, album's out. Excuse me? I mean, he'd been posting paintings that he'd been working on Instagram for months. And I said, ooh, new Sefu dropping. No, it's just paintings, my guy. Album. Anyway, I was so fucking excited to listen to this record because I hoped with the time he took away from music and to reflect and do whatever he liked doing, which is painting, as this artwork is by him, and I think the rest of his album covers are his paintings too. I hoped that this would be a brilliant return, but unfortunately, it is kind of a letdown. You get to see the reasons why almost immediately with the track Natty, which starts off with a really long instrumental intro, which is fine for an intro because it's supposed to, you know, build anticipation and whatever, but it just goes for so long and it starts turning into kind of like one of Trix Point Never's replica, with it looping the same sample over and over and over and over and then warping before coming into a very short verse near the end of the song. It's an odd little intro that didn't exactly get me hyped for the album. However, the following track, The Child's Heart, is almost a complete flip on the problems that I had with it. The intro is concise. The bars are very heartfelt and emotional and very poignant. Call me indecent, but it's a little weird seeing white people with black dogs on leashes. Like, that is a brilliant fucking line to open the track with. 21 cops, 1 traffic stop, fire 21 shots. How is that not excessive? Sefu is hungry on this track, and that easily makes it a highlight. Even with the rough recording and mix of it, it's still a really good track. What's Free is one of the points where we get to see him implementing more trap elements into it, as he seems to do more often on this record than I think ever before. And I don't feel like it works that well because the strings and hi-hats and everything just feel so off-kilter. Like, that's probably the point, given Sefu's other work is a bit more avant-garde and abstract, but I feel like it's a bit too off rhythm and weird, and especially with how Sefu raps like so on the beat. He's not doing like a laid back chill flow or anything. No, he's a bit more up tempo on this one. It just feels very sloppy all around. The instrumental on There's a New High Chaser didn't take very long for me to fall in love with it, with its very simple soul chops, and then Sefu going off a bit. But the issue with this track is it's like 2.5 minutes long, but Sefu's verse is just so short. Like, I can just put the entire thing right here. And that's one of the biggest issues with this record, is the instrumentals take up a whole lot more space than Sefu does. Now, I'm not sure if Sefu's producing these beats. I'm sure he probably is, because there's no one else credited, but is this an instrumental record? A lot of these tracks open with very long instrumentals, and there are a few just strictly instrumental tracks on this record. Like, Sefu isn't rapping for most of it, which is fine. He can do what he wants with his own albums, but he raps like too much for it to be an instrumental record and like not enough for it not to be, so it just kind of feels weird and disjointed in that way. Like Heartbroken, for instance, is pretty much a strictly instrumental track, which kind of loops me in with his instrumental in like the first minute or so, but it's again 2 minutes 16 seconds, so it kind of loses me by the end. Like usually with instrumental records you'll see that there's a whole bunch of tracks and then like each of them are like a minute or so, whereas this one, where it does have an instrumental track, it feel like it either goes for too long or it'll go for way too long at the intro of a song and then have a tiny Sefu verse and then go for a bit longer at the end. It just feels like it has a lack of identity on this project or something, and I don't feel like it should for Sefu's return, unfortunately. I don't fucking know. Track 7, We Live, is a highlight, not only on this record, but for Sefu's entire discography, in my opinion. The way that the instrumental builds with it. It's just one solo loop, by the way. From what I can tell, it's just one loop that builds and builds and builds with the mix of it getting more clear and less hazy and whatever. As Sefu goes off about a dysfunctional relationship as a good amount of his songs are. I blow a kiss to the pics, you was tripping, but now I'm missing the trips. Like, Sefu's bars are more poignant than ever on this track, and the mix also sounds fantastic. The way his voice lightly echoes over this instrumental really helps to feel like a spotlight is shining down on him as he's just pouring his heart out over this brilliant soul sample. And overall, it's just a damn good song that builds and builds and builds. The only thing that I wish I could that I could have more on this song is just it concluding with something, like it having a big finish. It doesn't have that. I'm fine with that, though. It's still a great song for what it is. Never Done is one that starts with a pretty weird trap soul sort of vibe. Like, it's really glitchy, punchy, the 808s are smooth as hell, but then it transitions into a different, just basic soul loop, and the trap thing is is just entirely gone. And then Sefu has a short verse, and then the song is over at 1 minute and 4 seconds. And this also kind of feels like a Before We Knew leftover with how weird its ideas are. Following that, we have Still Manic, which is another entirely instrumental cut. While I also wish this one could be shorter, it does hold my attention a lot more, with it having a whole lot more progression and more layers coming in as the song goes along. Lifetime is another sort of trap soul fusion, but this one has like the worst recording quality on the entire record. So it just feels really, really out of place. And then the album ends with GZO, which I think stands for Gazo Sound, which is his like label thing. And it's just kind of an underwhelming note to end off, as I feel like he's just doing his best like Griselda impression with the vocal doubling and the very bare bones instrumental. Kind of a weaker note to end off this mixed bag of a record. So yes, while this does contain like one of the highest highs Sefu has had, there's also a lot of just mediocrity, I feel like, in here. It just feels like it's all over the place, doesn't entirely know what it wants to be, and I feel like could use some editing, especially on like the structure portion, which I know isn't the main focus of like abstract avant-garde hip-hop like this. It's mainly about the lyrical content, but even that isn't here all the way, as the verses are way too short, or just the recording quality is just borderline unlistenable. Unfortunately, I am feeling like a 4+ on this record. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. Bye.